Marcus had applied to 32 jobs in 3 weeks, 32 applications, 32 rejections. Some came as emails, cold, automated, one-line responses that felt less like a human decision and more like a door quietly closing in his face. Others never came at all, which somehow felt even worse, because silence, Marcus had learned, was its own kind of answer. He was 22 years old, freshly graduated from community college, and completely broke. His rent was due in 6 days. His bank account had $11 in it, and his mother, who had worked double shifts at a laundry facility for the past 4 years just to help him finish school, was counting on him to finally stand on his own 2 feet. Every morning, Marcus would put on his only dress shirt, a slightly faded white button-down he had borrowed from his uncle, and never returned to iron it as best he could, and walk out the door with his folder of printed resumes and a quiet, stubborn kind of hope. And every evening, he would walk back through that same door with that same folder and one less reason to believe things would change. On the 14th day, Marcus walked into a small restaurant on 5th Street that had a handwritten "Help Wanted" sign taped to the window. The manager, a heavy-set man named Gerald, looked Marcus up and down before he even finished introducing himself. Gerald told him they were looking for someone with at least 2 years of restaurant experience. Marcus had none. Gerald told him the position required a food handler's certification. Marcus didn't have one. And when Marcus offered to work the first week for free just to prove himself, Gerald laughed. Not meanly, just the way people laugh when they've already made up their mind and the conversation is already over for them. Marcus thanked him anyway and walked back out onto the street. He sat down on a bench outside and stared at the folder in his hands. 32 resumes, still full, still untouched. He had been carrying them around like a kind of faith, the belief that someone, somewhere, would give him a chance. He was starting to wonder if that person existed. It was getting late. Marcus hadn't eaten since the night before. He had exactly $11 to his name and a 6-block walk back to the apartment where his mother was waiting. He stood up slowly, straightened his borrowed shirt, and started walking. That is when he saw the old man. He was sitting on the sidewalk outside a convenience store, his back against the wall, his eyes fixed on the ground. He looked to be in his 70s, maybe older. His clothes were worn thin. His shoes had a split along the left sole. In front of him sat a small paper cup with a few scattered coins at the bottom. Most people walked past him without a second glance. Marcus stopped. He stood there for a moment, looking at the old man. He thought about his $11. He thought about his rent. He thought about his mother. He thought about every door that had been closed in his face that week. And then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a $5 bill, and placed it gently in the cup. The old man looked up. His eyes were tired but sharp, the kind of eyes that had seen a great deal of life and remembered most of it. He looked at Marcus carefully. Then he asked a simple question. He asked Marcus why he looked so sad. Marcus almost kept walking, but something about the old man's voice, steady and unhurried, like someone who had all the time in the world, made him stop. And before he knew it, Marcus was sitting down on the sidewalk next to a stranger, telling him everything. The applications, the rejections, the $11, his mother, the borrowed shirt. The old man listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, he nodded slowly. Then he said something Marcus would carry with him for the rest of his life. He said that the most dangerous moment in any person's journey is not when things get hard. It is when they start believing that hard means impossible. Then the old man reached into the worn canvas bag beside him, pulled out a small business card, and handed it to Marcus. Marcus looked down at it. The name on the card read, Daniel Everett, founder, Everett Group. Marcus did not sleep well that night. He turned the card over in his hands 100 times, unsure whether to believe it was real. A man sitting on a sidewalk with coins in a paper cup and a founder's business card in his bag. It felt impossible. It felt like a mistake. It felt like exactly the kind of hope that had let him down before. But the next morning, he put on his borrowed shirt one more time, picked up his folder, and called the number. The call was answered on the second ring. The woman on the other end confirmed that yes, Daniel Everett was the founder of the Everett Group, one of the largest privately owned hospitality companies in the state, operating 14 hotels and 3 restaurant chains. She told Marcus that Mr. Everett had already called ahead, that he had described Marcus in detail, and that there was an entry-level operations position available if Marcus wanted to come in that afternoon for a conversation. Not an interview, a conversation. Marcus arrived 40 minutes early. He sat in the lobby of a building that was nothing like any place he had ever been before. Glass walls, polished floors, people moving with purpose in every direction. When he was finally brought into the office, Daniel Everett was already there, no longer in worn clothes, but in a quiet, well-fitted suit, looking every bit the founder of a company that employed over 300 people. He smiled when Marcus walked in. He told Marcus that every few months he sat outside on that sidewalk just to see who would stop. Marcus started work that Monday. It was an entry-level position, long hours, modest pay, and more to learn than he had ever imagined. But for the first time in months, Marcus walked through a door that did not close behind him. Within a year, he had been promoted twice. Within 3 years, he was managing operations for one of the company's flagship restaurants. And on the evening of his first major promotion, he called his mother, still in the same apartment, still working hard, and told her she could finally stop. She cried. He cried. And somewhere in the middle of that phone call, Marcus thought about a sidewalk, a paper cup, and $5 he almost didn't give. He thought about how close he had come to walking past. Because here is what Marcus learned, and what anyone who has ever felt invisible, overlooked, or one rejection away from giving up needs to hear. Kindness is never wasted. Even when you have almost nothing left to give, the act of choosing to give it anyway says everything about who you are, and it has a way of finding its way back to you. The world does not always reward the loudest or the most qualified or the most connected. Sometimes when it matters most, it rewards the ones who stop.